Hi everybody, it's Deirdre here from Starwise Clairvoyant Astrology, just giving you the little weekly update of what's going on. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is Mercury Retrograde. So this is something that, is probably the most common astrological retrograde that we constantly hear about. And that's because it has a very strong effect on us, but also because it happens 3 times a year for approximately 3 weeks each time. So the current Mercury retrograde that we're in started on the 21st of April and will go through until the 15th of May. And it's a Mercury retrograde in Taurus. So what this means is, there's a lot of talk about Mercury retrograde and all the things that can go wrong in a Mercury retrograde. And yes, that's true. These things exist. It's never a good idea to try and book or travel within a Mercury retrograde. Things can go wrong. It's never a good idea to make major financial purchases during a Mercury retrograde, because often you can't quite see the truth of what you're buying or exactly what the product's like. Something might be hidden or not come to view for you, and so it can often end up that you've purchased something that isn't what you thought it was going to be, or was a waste of your money. And the other reason is that we should never sign any major agreements or make any major commitments during a Mercury retrograde, because they often end up having to be renegotiated or re-looked at in some way, because you don't have, it could be that all the facts aren't there, or you don't have all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, or something's missing that you weren't aware of. So there's always something that can come up later. So it's just best to avoid those. But rather than focusing on all the negative aspects of Mercury retrograde, what I'd like to talk to you about today is the positive aspects of Mercury retrograde. So, Mercury retrograde, I think, is a fantastic thing. And the fact that it happens 3 times a year is even better, even though it can be disruptive. The only time it's really disruptive is when you're trying to do something. And of course, we're always trying to do things. But, if we know in advance that this is a time period coming up where doing things and taking action can be challenging, then you try not to schedule things to do at that time. And of course, it's not always, not that easy or that cut and dried. Sometimes we have to do things at certain times that don't work, that Mercury retrograde can get in the way of, but we have to keep going anyway. So what you can find is that if you have something on the go, if you're already negotiating a contract, or if you're already working on a project and you're up to the final stages, and it comes to Mercury retrograde and things have to be signed off or committed to. If something has happened before Mercury retrograde and it's already in motion, that motion should be enough to bring it through to the way you want it to come through. So that momentum that it's already built up carries on through the retrograde and doesn't get interrupted by the retrograde. It just carries on because it's already got that flow, it's already got that momentum. So it kind of overrides the retrograde because it's already got its own story that it's telling, and it doesn't need that to interfere with it. But not always, but most of the time, it does work. So what the best use of a Mercury retrograde is it allows us to go within and reassess everything. So if you are working on a project, or there's some idea you want to get off the ground, or there's somewhere you want to travel to, or there's something you want to study, or something you want to change in your life, this is the perfect time to re-look at it, to really do your due diligence, reassess it, revisit it, re-look at it, re-everything it. Because when the Mercury retrograde gives us this period of time where we don't need to take action, where we can just look at what we're doing and make sure that it's right, that we've got all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted, all our ducks in a row, as much as you can possibly ever get your ducks in a row. But it does allow you that time to go within and look at what needs to be done. Because, if we're constantly on the go, if we're constantly switched into action mode, then we're always acting, we're always reacting, we're always getting things done, we're always finishing things, starting things, whatever. And it never gives us enough time to stop and think whether this is the right thing for us, or whether we are doing it the right way, or whether we do have all the information that we need, or whether we do have all the abilities that we need to be able to whatever we want to happen to come to fruition in the most successful way possible. So Mercury retrograde gives you this amazing opportunity to just dive right into it and really explore what you're doing, why you're doing it, and whether it has merit and whether it has the momentum that it needs, but also whether you've got all the facts, whether you've got all the information you need on hand to be able to take that next step. And the next step comes when Mercury turns direct. which, as I said, will be on the 15th of May. But we have to also be aware with Mercury retrograde, there's the 3 weeks where he's in retrograde, and the week before that happens and the week after that finishes are what we call the Mercury shadow period. So those can also be times where things can be difficult to get off the ground, and where you'd probably be a little bit careful about commitments and major purchases and that sort of thing, just simply because it's that shadow period where it just is dying off or just starting off. And with this particular Mercury retrograde, it's going to occur in the sign of Taurus. So Taurus energy is a very methodical, very down to earth, very practical energy. And it's the type of energy that likes structure. Like all the earth signs, it likes to have structure, it likes to have a plan. It's not an energy for winging it or just suddenly coming up with an idea and acting on it spontaneously. It likes to take its time. It likes to know that it's reviewed and researched everything it needs to do to take that next step. So there really couldn't be a better time for Mercury to be in retrograde in Taurus than now, when we're all being asked at this time to just look at what we're doing with our lives and reassess our direction. And that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a time where you have to change direction, but at the same time as we have Mercury in retrograde in Taurus, we also have the North Node is still in Taurus, and so is Uranus, and so is the Sun now. So there's a lot of activity going on in that sign at this particular time. So with Uranus, I've talked a little bit about this before, but Uranus in Taurus is a 7-year transit. So he's going to be there for quite some time. So he's always bringing up the unexpected. So wherever Taurus energy sits in your natal chart is where you can expect the unexpected for the next just under 6 years. And it's also where you can, with the North Node moving through there, it's also where new opportunities can present themselves during this time. So the North Node has got until mid-July before he moves out of Taurus and into Aries, because the North Node is the only one that moves clockwise. So he moves into Aries. So what we've got at the moment, and it is taking us back to around about 2005, or sort of the end of 2005 and into 2006. That was the last time we had the North Node in Taurus. And so we're coming to the end of the transit now. So it's around about what I'd like you to think about is what you were doing around about maybe about December 2005 right through until about April 2006. And whatever was going on there then for you, what opportunities were presenting themselves, what things you were interested in, what things were coming your way, what people you were meeting, where you were going, what you were doing, can all be given a sort of a new opportunity in that area or in an area along those lines. So for example, it might have been back in 2005, it was a time when you were considering changing your career. And therefore, maybe, there were more than one opportunity presented itself to you, or maybe there was only the one, but there was a change there. And you either took that opportunity or you didn't. And maybe you didn't. Maybe you look back, looking back at 2005, you could see there was this great opportunity for you, but you weren't brave enough to take it, or you didn't think it was right for you, or it just didn't feel like the right time, whatever the reason was that you didn't take it. That same or a very similar opportunity can be offered to you now to see what you're going to do with it this time, and to give you a second chance often with that as well. So just be aware of that. And any opportunity that comes to you at this time, it is important that you look into it. And while we're in Mercury retrograde time, you don't have to take action on it. This is the perfect time to be presented with something and have the time and the energy to go and investigate it and look into it and research it before you take action or before you sign on the dotted line or whatever it is. So use this time to really look at where you're going and what you're doing right now, and make sure that you are going in the direction you want to be going in, and that everything you need for that to be a successful journey is all in place for you, or that at least you're working on it, or it's within hand's reach, because this is the time to really make sure everything is all lined up. And then come May the 15th, and approximately a week after that, you can really start to take action. And when you do go to take that action, you'll know that you know what you're doing. You're not just winging it. You're not just, oh, look, there's an opportunity, I'll run with it. You've actually done your research. You've looked into it, and you know what you need to take that next step, and probably what the next step will be after that, and after that, and after that. So it's a great time for planning, creating structure, creating steps that you might need to take along the way, and maybe putting time frames in there of when you need to achieve this step and when you need to achieve the next step. But don't be afraid to just take some time out from being active, from being productive, from being constructive, and to just look at what you're doing, and don't worry so much about all the rushing around that we so commonly do on a daily basis. Just take your time and enjoy the ride. So have a great Mercury retrograde, everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.